Okay. Hello, everyone. Sorry about the wait there. You got to blame Thanksgiving. If I had to guess what the technical difficulties are, because I'm sure you're curious, it's Thanksgiving. There has to be, my block just went from 30 residents to about 300 with people home on the holidays. So we're here. The Dungeons of Joe. Tonight is step 10 and 11. And before we get there, like always, let's do a quick review of steps 1 through 9. So steps 1, we admit that we have a fatal and progressive disorder, substance use disorder, that's compromised our sanity, our ability to tell what's true from false, especially when it comes to our use. Step 2 is that by myself, I cannot get sober. I'm coming to believe that I need help, be it in the form of a higher power. We're possibly flirting with this idea. You might already have a faith. For some, it might be trusting another human being. And that could come in the form of joining a recovery community, a licensed clinician, a therapist, 30-day treatment, someone you're going to take a risk and think, I could get sober the way they did it, and it's not my plan. Step 3 is making a commitment that I'm going to recognize addiction as something a little deeper. And we're not getting into the neurological or the dopamine of addiction. We're going to start to describe it as a personality for the sake of sharing in this community's definition. And we're going to call it 4 character defects, the worst part of addiction: selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. The first being selfishness. I'm going to confront this idea of self, that maybe I don't know what drives me, motivates me. Maybe I could be wrong. We're going to challenge our egos and see where we could peel away the authentic self from where my ego was and how my ego relates to my addiction. AA does this by saying, even when we're charitable, isn't there really another plan? Like challenging these ideas of the real self. Who's watching me in my head? Who am I addressing almost when I say, oh, Joe, what are you doing? Who am I talking to? So this idea of selfishness is almost existential too, not just the obvious things that are selfish, like stealing, taking time away from family, work, employers, failing into keeping my social life or responsibilities intact because I'm going into later stages of addiction. This is an obvious problem. When you read NA or AA's text, they're getting a little more to the root problem: conscious life. Can I start to view this honestly? We took an inventory then. Once we can admit that we want to go through the rest of the steps, either by committing through a prayer that we're going to search through, re-engaging a spiritual life. And to do this, we feel it might be impossible unless we start to examine, resentments and fear, this inventory, to get away from the wreckage, this burning fire from the past. And they give us some suggestions on how to write this, is in the form of a story we call resentments, and how we refeel our life. We have this unreconciled emotional life that keeps repeating itself regardless of the people we resent. Then we write down our fears. Some of them could be associated with resentments, others may not be. Then we write down maybe a list of harms, people we don't feel sour against, but we've harmed them nonetheless. We saw when we write that down, that's the basis for our story when we trust someone else, another human being. That could be a sponsor, a friend, a therapist. And we tell this story, and that's our script. And then it gives you this distinct line in AA. The original kind of approach to a 4th step is we tell someone our entire life story. That's a huge order, depending on what period of sobriety you're telling this at. And we're doing our best to be honest with it by using the structure of the 4th step. We commit to this, and we see there's promises already being offered to us in relief from addiction impulse, obsession, compulsion, anxiety. This might start to be reduced from trusting someone and telling our whole story to them. Immediately, we go into the sixth step, which is an hour of contemplation, or we could call it meditation. It's our first introduction to what we'll talk about tonight. Step 11. The introduction to this is real specific. Can we review the first 5 steps? Did we miss something? Did we forget to put someone on the list? Was I scared doing my 5th step and didn't feel comfortable telling my sponsor everything? Do I need to include someone else in this life story? Maybe I'd be comfortable telling another part to someone else. So we see this way a redundancy to be saved. Did we go all the way? It also allows for imagination and new ideals to come in, because this is where we're going to form them, the opposites of this story. Because when we we see how we're reviewing the 4th step, one of the last lines in a text says, we review this resentment from every angle. And one question we ask ourselves, what could we have done instead? This allows for a new timeline in our minds to create a person we may want to be. What else could I have done differently so this relationship didn't fail, or I didn't hurt this person? These ideals could be thought about in step 6 and 7. And then 7's this commitment. For some, it comes in the form of a prayer. My Creator, I'm now willing you have all of me, good and bad. That's the pretty secular prayer in AA's book. NA is very similar, but I commit to letting the feelings of the past be resolved. I know fear, resentment, and dishonesty could crop up at any time, but I want to break a chain that I'm not repeating this past, this trauma, this PTSD, if you'd like to describe it as, of addiction. This story where anxiety and depression have stolen things from me, and then relief from its active use, drinking and using drugs. Lisa, don't worry about being late. I was late. So we see that in step 7, and we want that fire to go out. And we don't want to live leading with the chin of like these aren't going to be the leading part of our personality, these 4 character defects. Step 8 is kind of a cheat. We've come to find out with Joe Kane was here last week. Step 8 is basically 95% complete because you wrote a 4th step if you did a good job. You find that your resentment list, and definitely your harms, is this list that you're going to go out and make amends to. Some even go a step further. When they have a resentment, they ask a question, who else was harmed by this? And one resentment could have 5 to 6 amends attached to it, as we talked about last week. So you begin your amends, and we talked about different strategies to do this, and the motivation has to be to change something, to fix it, not to feel good, or we'll be sorely disappointed. And we're going to miss the point of having what they're describing a spiritual awakening, or in psychological terms, they describe it a personality change. We'll miss the point of that if we set off to do these amends, and with that being our motivation. So step 10, it's continued to take personal inventory when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 10 is steps 1 through 9 condensed into a daily way of living. It's condensed into being incorporated into our cognitive life. This is how we think. Do I have a problem? Do I feel distress? In all probability, let me look at it from the angle that it's my fault. And this isn't beating yourself up. This isn't morbid. Addiction, if it took its course in your life, we're in a good position to say that, because we're not going to fall apart by taking this position now. We have power, we have strength, we have a little momentum and confidence. Is this problem my fault? Because if it's my fault, I can solve it. If it's tragedy or distress from someone else, I can't solve it on my timeline. I'm going to have to learn to deal with it. But we want to see problems of our own making first and foremost. So that's a way of thinking. We learned that we can meditate briefly in this step 6. So you see the steps, they're repeating themselves. We go through the first kind of run, this 1 through 10. But when we start to look at 10, 11, and 12, what we're looking at is living this way, thinking this way, and acting this way. So that's what's so fundamental about AA, NA, and even refuge recovery and Dharma recovery. I don't have to believe certain tenets to have a spiritual awakening. I don't have to be subscribed to some intellectual doctrine, nor is it going to be in conflict with an existing faith, if I'm Christian, Muslim, Jewish, Buddhist. This is a set of actions. And that's what's so marvelous about AA helping alcoholics and addicts. I don't have to believe something. You don't have to browbeat an ideology in my head. I can act my way into seeing the results. The results are that I'm restored to sanity and I could recover from an addiction. So I could act my way into this, and then, my mind follows. That's some people's experience. And we're going to see this repeat itself in 10, 11, and 12, because here's 3 steps we can't complete. And just by reading them, you could see that. We continue. That's a continual action that has no end in sight. We saw it. We saw it through these 2 behaviors and actions of prayer and meditation. To improve our conscious contact with God, whatever God is for you and how you want to unpack that. That could be something of your own religion, or it could be the community of Alcoholics Anonymous as a whole. And then 12, we carry this message. What's the message? We carry that the steps have changed our personality so substantially. I don't use drugs or drink every day, and life is not a nightmare. So these are steps that cannot be completed. They become a practice. So step 10, that's the review. Now there is a little kind of mix up, a snafu. Sometimes we call what we do in the evening in most rehabs step 10. And just to split hairs a little bit and have some, fun. That's not step 10 in AA's terms. This was kind of a kind of branding on that nightly ritual. Step 10 can happen at any moment of your day. And the sooner the better. You don't wait till the end of the night to sweep up the streets. Some of us can, but if you know you're wrong, you have to act promptly. We promptly admit it. That's not even every evening we admit it. So if you read the book closely, that's step 11. And what we do at Avenues, we're a 12-step based, principle-based recovery center and community. We we take that inventory at night as a ritual, and it's basically a meditation, but we do it in a group form. But if you did that by yourself on page 86, and you read that page every night, that was the page I told you at step 4. My sponsor asked me to go to bed and read that every night. You will not create new fires as you're going through the steps. And if that practice stays with you, it's very hard to get sick again. It really is. If you could read that page every night, you're living a spiritual life. And it's a meditation, like a review, a very simple meditation. And that's how AA describes it, and puts you in this position to have, they're suggesting twice a day you should meditate. And you don't hear that said at meetings often, but that's what they're suggesting. Then when we rise in the morning, we want to set an intention. We want to have a plan. We want to maybe offer a prayer, a petition. Like the old AA quote, they're always great. They simplify things. Praying is asking, or talking. Meditation is listening. I always found that's a real entry-level idea of how to approach these 2 things. But when we rise in the morning, we ask that we be divorced from self-pity and selfishness and self-seeking ways. These darker parts that flourished in an act of addiction, and they're hard to admit to, but we already did that. We know how to confront this ugliness in us. So they ask that we get in this routine of doing it in the morning. And your life could expand from that point. They could become more complex or simpler, whatever you want. But they're the first suggestions they're offering for a life of meditation. How to practice step 11. That's the suggestion 12-step groups are offering. Now, if you expanded upon that or coupled AA, if you've been in AA for a while, you're feeling stale, you could go to a Dharma recovery community online or in a city or refuge. And they have more forms and different ways to explore meditation. So let's step back. Step 10 becomes this way of life, this cognitive way that we speak to each other in this community. Is a problem my fault? Do I own amends? Is this fear? Is this resentment in my life? Because now we're not talking about active use. What this language and believing these ideas are that they're a part of me and I could speak this way, I'm pushing compulsion to drink and use drugs into a different world. I'm recognizing the prior condition before a relapse in use. I'm recognizing it as behavior, ideas, and moods and a way of thinking. Fear, these are all things that happen in the mind first before I would use. Selfish behaviors that aren't drinking or using drugs that I'm getting dopamine kind of fixes from. And if they're left unchecked, I'm risking going back to active use. It's kind of, you could see how this protects us, at least mentally. Step 11, they're the suggestions of a 12-step program, but there's a lot of flourishing kind of programs and offerings out there for people in recovery, being from the simple readings in the morning. Avenues offers one through what we call hammock readings. Every morning, you could find them on Facebook or YouTube or get emailed. It sets an intention that's not my own. I was joking at work today with Akiva. There's always this position from people who study dreams that the person you are in your dreams is in a total state of psychosis without a body. It's an imagination. The rules of reality aren't set. And then I wake up. It's like, who woke up first, the addict, the alcoholic, or the authentic Joe I want to be? It's good to right when I rise, reflect that I'm the same person when I drink. I drink every day. I use narcotics. That person's past is still living in my mind. I want to set it to an intention to recognize that. That's a condition if I don't take care of myself that can come back into my life. I set an intention from universal values and thoughts. It could be either a reading. It could be watching hammock readings. It could be a prayer. That was hard for me in the beginning. I felt very agnostic, atheist. So some of the prayers that I was going to read tonight, like the prayer of St. Francis, which is, he didn't write it. Historians always argue over that. That's a caveat, but it's in the 12 and 12 of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm looking at this prayer, and I've had my resentments and soreness about religion in the past. I'm letting that go. That's just not my fight. It's not important. I don't want to die of alcoholism. And I'm looking at the prayer, and it says, can I bring fear? Or can I bring love instead of fear? Can I understand people before they need to understand me? I'm reading this. I'm getting really moved. I'm not cynical anymore. This veil has dropped off me. And I want all of this. I want this to be who I am. I don't want to read some horrifying news story and share it with people all day. Do I think I'm enlightening them, or am I sharing my anxiety with them? Why don't I go into a conversation listening? Why don't I try to understand someone else before I browbeat them into understanding me? These were things I had to challenge in myself in step 10 to continue this behavior, to make the spiritual awakening take hold. Step 11 for me came hard. I'm very uncomfortable meditating. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I'm focusing on my breath. I breathe real shallow. I'm a compulsive smoker. It's reminding me how, yucky I am. So this is how neurotic I am. But I got a practice going. And it was out of need because of, that's who I am as an addict and alcoholic. My pain became so great and discomfort, even in early sobriety. I needed this tool. I wanted to trust it. I didn't know how meditation was going to work. I didn't know if it would be some stress relief. But what I found by practicing it for 6 months, staying committed, 20 to 10 minutes in the morning, was so profound. It changed the course of my life. It's probably why I'm on this YouTube channel tonight and Facebook. It changed the course of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to treat other people, how I measure my idea of self, where the alcoholic and addict just lurks in my mind after seeing my this recent inventory I wrote. It just was so profound, a topic, Joe Van Wee, me, that I knew very little about for 40 years. And I thought I knew so much about myself. And there was some huge blind spots that I did not want to go forward with without knowing more of why I can change, why I want to treat people better, and give myself permission to be a better version of myself. Step 11 allows this. It allows a lot of that. It allows a calmness, and it takes the critic out of me that's always looking to ruin my day. It puts space between when we're sharing compulsion is an eighth of a second before it becomes a behavior in someone who's suffering from substance use disorder, trauma, PTSD. I found a daily practice of meditation allows time to slow, that I could have more choices than the mind that only gives me two, fear or, fight or flight. I'm starting to see this starts with thinking, thoughts, reactions. Can I observe them without judgment and think, no, Joe, you can have more choices and change. So I want to open it up for questions, and I could pop out some more suggestions in my email. There's a lot of great apps out there today, from Headspace, Calm, Sam Harris's Waking Up, that give you a beginner's course to see how profound meditation is. It's more than stress relief. I think you're failing to see like the whole picture of what meditation can be, rather than stress relief or a calmness. It's an enlightenment to a life I never thought could exist for me. Let's open the chat up for some questions. Uh, hey, thanks. Happy Thanksgiving. Hi, Bri. Hey, growth steps. Yeah, that's what it is. It's a growing. Um, I like the idea of step 11 of, I heard some philosopher describe addiction as finding your conscious life intolerable. Alcohol, marijuana, cocaine kind of quell this for a while. It works for a while. And then being that it's an addiction, I can't stop even when I want to. Um, meditation starts to examine, what is this discomfort? What makes me so uncomfortable? Where does my anxiety begin? Is it beginning with a thought, or is it just this neurological problem I'm just going to have to live with? It starts to really put space in my mind to understand that there might be a lot of room in between those two ideas, that I'm stuck here. And that's what they're saying. You tapped into a power. I don't know if that source of power, it doesn't seem like it's coming from me. In that sense, it seems shared. It's a shared kind of idea that I want to be more connected to people. I want to be engaged in a community. I want to relieve others of pain. I don't want to be afraid of being uncomfortable, because life calls for us to be uncomfortable sometimes. And I think good sobriety doesn't skirt from that. I now have some confidence that my pain won't destroy me. I don't have to increase all my pleasures every time. They will pass too. So meditation gives me this measured life where I'm just more available for people. I'm present. I'm just not constantly needing to be somewhere else all the time. Hey, Brandon, what's going on? Question from Akiva. How did you overcome your inherent panic of being with yourself during meditation? For me, that seems to always be the thing that is the barrier to me staying with the practice consistently. Yeah, that was a huge barrier for me. And it was something. It's funny enough. I'm in active addiction the last 2 years of my drinking, 39 to 40. Um, I used a lot of cocaine, and then I would try to calm other days with Xanax. So you can imagine what benzos and cocaine have this effect on my mind. I'm in a chronic state of angst. Um, but I was trying to meditate. I had a meditation group coming to my house as everything was falling apart. I don't know why these people showed up. They stopped showing up because I'd be drunk all the time. But I remember knowing something in my gut told me the answer for me was there. But I could not start a practice because of what we discussed in the fourth step. I had this mountain of unresolved pain I would not confront. And I wanted to just be on the other side of that mountain, just relief. I just couldn't face off with the things that were tangible, things I had to confront: the collapse of my emotional life, relationships, my business, how I was treating other people, how nihilism was washing over me, the fact of being an atheist turned into a toxicity, not because of atheism, because of being disappointed, disillusioned that life might have no meaning. These ideas were consuming me. And so I was desperate to have any experience that can make me feel enlightened, or there was a greater texture to life than just chasing some kind of security. It was getting dreadful. So to answer the question, overcome it, the big hurdle for me was steps 4 through 9. When I started the amends, I found out my entry into a daily silent practice of breathing got a little more comfortable, because now it was being driven by a curiosity like, whoa, I can't start cleaning up the wreckage I caused, but where am I going? So there was a little excitement with that kind of position. I'm still alive. I'm still breathing, breath's coming in and out. And I read some books that were helpful, that helped me waking up. But Sam Harris was easy for me because I liked the way he wasn't nihilistic and how he started a daily meditation practice. So sometimes it can be uncomfortable because there's revelations in these meditations that are, could feel icky and gross, things I didn't consider about myself, or seeing myself for the first time, like objectively outside of the view of me, and examining behavior. Can I change that? I was lucky in the first 6 months of practice. I got such profound insight to the idea that I can change. I don't have to force the change, but I got excited by observing things I never considered about myself in 40 years. It didn't go into morbidity. It immediately became exciting, like, wow, how much do I not know about myself, or the topic of exploring consciousness, exploring how I can meet the idea of what I think is myself. It took me like rapidly away from the crisis of active addiction, and more into the hope of what I can be for others, and myself. That's how it became exciting. That was a long-winded answer. Sorry. I just want to thank you for everything. Steps alone until I can find a sponsor. You have really helped me understand. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you, Lisa. I only understand the steps because someone was very patient with me. If I had to read this book alone, I always considered myself literate, but that's a very hard book to read. NA, I find easier to read. It's a little more clear, concise, to the point, but it doesn't have the same historic kind of texture. I find other support communities pretty clear and objective, but there's something about reading, if you're an A member, reading the book together and peeling back. What is this He's hitting gems I didn't fully get reading it by myself. It becomes an experience of getting close with someone, trusting them, understanding how they're an addict and an alcoholic just like me. I stopped counting distinctions between us and start seeing how similar we are. And I'm going to trust them. And this happens up to step 5. And then I fully trust them. I start telling them the story. So if you need any resources in finding a sponsor in your area, please email myself. I'll put my email in there, or Megan, and we'll definitely find you the support and maybe see if we could hook you up with someone that you feel you jive with and could finish the steps with. If you need any other questions answered while you're doing it, you can always email me and I'll get back to you very quickly. Just double checking that I wrote the right email. This is was amazed if anyone would show up with the technical difficulties, but also tonight, I don't know where everyone's from, but Scranton, this is like New Year's Eve, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, to come out and be online and be a part of something that explores how you can change your life and not be stuck in the nightmare of addiction, regardless of what day or holiday it was. Eventually, they didn't matter to me. I think even when I drank, I didn't even enjoy going out. I took my drinking far too serious to be out in public on a night like this. I knew how nightmarish and ghoulish it had become. But to come out here and do this, I mean, you really want recovery. You want change. And I wanted it bad. I still do. And I'm fortunate enough to be at Avenues and see people who are just coming in, just holding on to any hope that they have a chance to change their lives. And I've always found the steps to be the language I understand, and it identifies the problem for me is my mind in sobriety is very uncomfortable. It becomes excruciating. And these steps that we just started into, 10, 11, and 12, give me like a rail, a guide path that if I am feeling distress and I'm realizing I might be challenging to be around, have I been working these steps? It becomes tangible. It's something I could point at. It's not misty. When I call my sponsor, it comes down to that language. Have you been reading page 86? Go back to the basics, Joe. If I feel resentments are kind of like gathering up, or I'm getting moody more, and my days become automatic. I'm on autopilot, and then I'm waking up. What was yesterday? This is the breeding ground cognitively for addiction to wake up. My ego will wake up and say, I could protect you. And that's before you drink or drug. And these are the 3 steps. If you got through the steps, like, how long would you want to wait? Over 2 years to get to this idea that you could live this way? Steps 10, 11, and 12 it's the path. It's the path to living free from drugs and alcohol, and living free from the torment and crisis my mind create in my relationships, at work, the things I love. I don't want that. And I know it works with the people I admire in recovery. These 3 steps are they're a beautiful way to live. No, it's not. Next week is step 12, and we're going to have a very special guest. And that'll be the last of this series. We'll do step 12 and how you carry this message. If you're in NA, AA, or if you're in another community, how you can practice. Always, you got to be available. This wasn't a free lunch. There's a spiritual debt to be paid to the people that took the time to help me or help you. We got to help others. And this is the total wall against relapse. Um, I always loved that idea Bill Wilson always put out there. Worst case scenario, the only thing that kept him sober when times were tight and filled with like dark depression, he went and helped another alcoholic. Some problems I can't solve by just thinking about them more or thinking about myself. We're going to find out next week. They might be solved by thinking about someone else and helping someone else. It gets us out of that autopilot of just considering your own problems. But the series, this has been an absolute honor to do this, and make the plans to keep this as a continual thing with more people involved, as an alumni service. And I'd love to hear some comments, or throughout the week, if you would inbox us or your alumni coordinator, some ideas of workshops you'd like to see. We've been toying with an idea of maybe a workshop just on step 11 between now and the end of the year that can go over means and ways of meditations that help deal with recovery, stress, resentment, forgiveness, and explore these ideas, safely as alumni on a workshop. We do not have to be limited to these things, and through Facebook and YouTube, if they're going to be dread or cause anxiety, let's put some good stuff out there to keep us engaged with each other. Oh wow, Bry. I was blessed to have a sponsor that took 6 months with me every Tuesday evening for an hour and a half. He read each step to me and asked me to do action on each step, from writing to saying the prayer in each step. For me, when I worked hard, make amends immediately, consider the word selfish, and work the last three. I'm being what God intends for me to be. Life is quite simply put, a blast. I have no business living in my life, but the power out there has other intentions. Thanks, Bri. I like what Brian mentioned. You know, I had trouble praying. It made me uncomfortable. Sometimes I have an easier time meditating. I have a hard time speaking language. I don't know what I was doing. I was agnostic, atheist to the degree I was uncomfortable of not knowing what am I doing. But the prayers in the book Brian mentions, they have a lot of great prayers that are for all of us, faithful or agnostic. The first step prayer is kind of a joke. For God's sake, how did I get started again? Right, that's the first prayer in the big book. It's Bill Wilson beating on the bar. It's still a prayer, even though it's in his story. The second really distinct prayer is the second step prayer. And we read it at every meeting, and I think it goes unnoticed as the second step prayer. We ask for protection with complete abandon. That's our commitment to finish step 3 in the steps. That's the second step prayer. The third step prayer, we know, my God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou will. Now, if you're secular, that could be AA. AA, I ask you to do it. You're giving yourself to your sponsor in the group to share. Maybe I could change these ideologies. Step 4, that's the most used prayer, I think. For me, it is, God, save me from being angry. Angus is a sick person. How can I be helpful to them? You could say that prayer every day. That's the fourth step prayer. It's to reserve and restrain anger. It's not to stop anger. It's to notice it and not have to act on it. By the time we get to step 11, we have seen these patterns. A is offering tools. NA is 12-step life's offering tools to notice something, not resist it right away, and change course. So it works. The 7th-step prayer is powerful. There's a lot of great prayers. The 11th-step prayers they're offering, divorce me from self-pity, self-seeking ways, and fear for this day. I made a plan for today, and I don't want this messing it up, because I know these thoughts could change anytime, of being in self-pity or morbidity, depression, so many things I don't have. That's a thought away from being gratitude. winding down a bit, guys. So if I put my email in there, any support or suggestions of things to explore all kinds of meditations, you know, doesn't matter if you're Christian, Catholic, Jewish, Islamic, Buddhist, you're secular, you're a pantheist. There's a lot of universal meditations and prayers and exercises that wouldn't ruffle any of our feathers, of us all being under the same tent. And this cognitive process that we're not the God. We can't afford to be hedonists because of our condition. We can't afford to be nihilistic and that there is no meaning to life. We have to create it and embrace it through the steps and live a life of intention and be present. I've wasted probably 2/3 of my life, even when I was sober, times of sober. I was not present. I always was somewhere else where it was going to be better. I was always pining for the future and trying to run from my memories of the past. I was always in a state of this angst, and I was so used to it, I didn't even know I was in it until this last go through the steps. I had enough pain to wake up to the fact I've been asleep. I want to be awake. And being awake is, it could open me up to being uncomfortable or in pain or feeling someone else's pain through empathy. And I don't have to run anymore. I could face off with life. Boom. New Orleans. Guys, if there's any other questions, I really hope let's finish strong with step 12. If you want to invite any other alumni. Also, take the chance this week to think of some comments, criticisms, suggestions to lift this up after the new year and get another workshop. And let's get 6 states kind of involved. We have some great ideas to continue this. I also would love to hear some ideas if there's a need or an interest in a mindfulness workshop. If you do a daily reading every morning or you want to share a nice intention with each other, please check out our hammock readings. They're on YouTube and Facebook, or you could sign up to our newsletter and email list where you could be notified every morning. They're 1 to 3 minute videos that could start the day with an intention. And they're kind of a variety from AA, NA, some secular readings, poetry on Fridays from our esteemed Akiva Stern that allow us to get in touch with what makes us so vulnerable and embrace it in a life of recovery. Hey, Jeremy popped in. Thanks, Jeremy. Action is the power. True knowledge. Yeah, true knowledge. It's an agent of change. We see that in Bill's story. I see it in my own story. Knowledge gets pretty useless if I can't turn it into action. And I think that's the power of our communities. Knowing you and the people we get sober around, Jeremy, gives me courage that they went before me. I didn't make up AA or the 12 steps. I didn't have to create this by myself. Someone paved the path, and I'm trusting it. And I'm all the better for it. So guys, again, please leave some comments either on your alumni page, message us at Avenues. My email's up there. And let's get creative. Let's keep thinking of creative ways to meet every week and have workshops that are based in mindfulness, practices that keep us sober, and the steps. I'm glad you all came out tonight, and I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving, safe and sober.